Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, this morning you put out a press release saying you've established a lobbyist register without any detail or substance to this announcement. It was an announcement about transparency measure, which was completely devoid of transparency. Chief Minister, can you please show some respect to Territorians and actually outline the detail about your lobbyist register, including who will be included on the register, how Territorians can publicly access the register, how it will be monitored, and what consequences will be there for your CLP ministers who do not abide by keeping the register current?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it's actually a fantastic question from the Leader of the Opposition, because we did deliver on yet another of our election commitments this morning in the lobbyist register. Now, I remind the Opposition Leader this is something that Labor refused to do. The Territory has never had a lobbyist register, and when we were asked last year, after increasing community support for a lobbyist register, increasing support for transparency measures, after what had been 8 years of a terrible government inflicted by integrity crisis, there was a real need for it, and we were very quick to put up our hand and say we'd be happy to bring in the Territory's first lobbyist register. And so, unlike Labor, we have done what we've said we would do, and we've also brought in this new integrity measure on top of existing measures, such as yourself, Madam Speaker, having an independent speaker, doubling the debate time for petitions, and of course having a legislative scrutiny committee, something that the previous government refused to bring to the Parliament. And we will see the legislative scrutiny committee reviewing the Territory Coordinator legislation once I've introduced it tomorrow. So the lobby register is very simple, and it is the Northern Territory's first time to have a lobby register. And what it does is it creates a register. So we're just working through the website now, but it is available on paper-based right now. So if proponents or if lobbyists send their details through, then they'll be sent the paper version of the form, and we're hoping to get the website online as soon as possible. And basically, if you are an official lobbyist, you must register all of the details of who you're being paid to lobby for and provide all of that transparency. And then when you are going to engage with a government minister, whether that's in writing or face-to-face, however it might be, the obligation is on the lobbyist to make sure that minister knows exactly who you are, who you work for, but who you're being paid to lobby on behalf of and for what, so that there is this real increased awareness on the part of ministers to understand, okay, this person's on a very clear mission being paid to do a very particular job. So to who it includes and who it doesn't, it's for third-party lobbyists, those official professional lobbyists, I suppose you would call it, lobby firms. It doesn't include, for example, industry bodies, so Chamber of Commerce, Northern Territory, Minerals Council, master builders, for example. They're not lobbyists, they're member-based organisations, and it's very transparent for government to know what they represent and who they are lobbying or rallying on behalf of. So we're very proud to deliver this today, and we're excited to see it in full operation.
Member for Fong Lim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, it was wonderful to attend yesterday's 2025 Year of Action event with our united 17-strong CLP team, where you outlined our key priorities as a government for the next 12 months. And, of course, our continued commitment to reducing crime, rebuilding the economy and restoring Territory lifestyle. I represent hundreds of businesses in my electorate of Fong Lim, and so I'm particularly interested to hear about our plans to back business, save them money and, of course, grow our population. Chief Minister, can you explain, for the benefit of the House, how 2025 will deliver action and certainty and security for Territorians?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much. And I'd really like to thank the member for Fong Lim. He does represent a huge number of local territory businesses, and he also acts as the Assistant Minister for the Department of Trade, Business and Asian Relations in that really important area of your expertise around migration, population growth, international education. And so I understand how important growing the economy is to you, Member for Fong Lim, but also to your community. And it's important for every single Territorian. And what we saw last week is the Treasurer and the Under-Treasurer do a roadshow right across the Territory, being open and transparent with Territorians about Labor's debt legacy and the fact that because of Labor's reckless fiscal mismanagement, we are set to hit as a Territory $15 billion debt by 28-29. In fact, this year it will be over $11 billion, Madam Speaker. And to give you an idea, when the CLP left government in 2016, debt was around the $2 billion mark. So you can see a huge, unprecedented spike in reckless spending. And so this has to serve as a wake-up call to all Territorians that the only way out of this mess is not through severe austerity, because that will hurt everyone at a time when people are already hurting the most. What we must do is grow our economy. That is how we will generate own source revenue. That is how we create jobs and get people to live in the Territory and move here. And so we outlined our plan of action for the next 12 months, a year that will be marked by action, certainty and security for all Territorians. And that's already started, Madam Speaker. I've just given notice of introduction of the Territory Coordinator Bill, a Territory first, a cutting-edge piece of economic reform for the Territory, the best we've seen in a decade and certainly leading the country by a country mile. And it's a new way of doing business for the Territory and we're so excited. We announced yesterday that we'd be abolishing third-party merits review, again sending a signal of confidence to investors that when you get an approval under the Petroleum Planning or Water Acts, it means it's an approval. You can take that approval to the bank. It is not going to change. And we're also later today, and I'm not preempting debate, but we will be debating payroll tax cuts for small and medium business. I mean, putting more money back in the pockets of the people creating the jobs and opportunities for Territorians and for our future. I couldn't think of a better way to spend the afternoon than debating that legislation, Member for Fong Lim. So we are so excited, and this is on top of our police retention bonus, which will start on 1 July, further backing in our police, our remote policing infrastructure plan so that disasters like the Nightcliff Police Station under Natasha Files never happen again. There is so much going on this year, Madam Speaker. We're excited about the future and we can't wait to deliver.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question's to the Minister for Domestic, Sexual and Family Violence. Minister, I note that on the January 23rd, you said that the $180 million that your government has committed to domestic, sexual and family violence prevention would, in your words, start to flow before the end of January. Can you please update the chamber with what funding under that $180 million has been rolled out? And can you detail which frontline services you have met with and what process the government is using to make decisions about funding allocations? Thank you.
Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Member for Johnston. That is the question I have been waiting for. And I've been waiting for it because I am absolutely delighted here in this chamber to announce, and one of the reasons why the full round of funding wasn't discussed until now was there were processes I had to follow, but we did in fact launch the circuit breaker across the Northern Territory before the end of January, which addresses recommendations 7 and 15 of the coroner's findings into the recent tragic deaths of 4 Aboriginal women. But I am delighted to stand here before you, Madam Speaker, to say that we will be funding ongoing, beyond the 5-year commitment made in the election, $36 million per year dedicated to domestic, family and sexual violence services. And what I can also tell you, Madam Speaker, is that we appreciate there's a lot of work to do in this space. We are dealing with the outcomes of neglect over the past decade or so of what was working and what wasn't working. We are dealing with the fact that we have to actually break that vicious cycle, which is what one of the agendas of the Circuit Breaker program is, where we can get to kids at an early stage in their life and break that cycle and address the root causes that are leading to them on a path of being perpetrators in the future. What we are going to do is those organisations that are currently funded until the end of this current financial year, June 2025, they will have their funding extended until June 2026, and we will continue to work with them over this next 18-month period to make sure that we are going to get the best possible results, Madam Speaker, for all Territorians in this space. We have a horrendous track record, 82% increase in domestic, family and sexual violence assaults over the last 8 years. This cannot continue. We will focus on behaviour programs, not just targeting men's behaviour, but supporting young people so that they can learn the skills to know how they can stand up for themselves and prevent.
Take your seat, please, Minister. What's your point of order, Member for Johnston?
Point of order. Thank you, Minister. And just I want to say it's wonderful news that it's ongoing funding.
Be quick.
What I actually, sorry, just in terms of what I wanted to ask, my question was what funding has, since the end of January, been rolled out? What frontline services have you met with?
Minister,
Thank you.
you've got the call.
Thank you. As I've already said, we rolled out the Circuit Breaker program across the Northern Territory. I have met with multiple organisations. I've met with Dawes, I've met with Ruby Gaia, I have met with a number of service deliveries in the Big Rivers region. I've met with services in Alice Springs. I was recently at Warramyunga talking to the amazing women in that environment about the wonderful programs
Minister,
that they
your time
do.
has expired. Member for Wanguri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, it's no secret that it's been a tough year for the Territory and the economy, with the NT ranking last out of its state and Territory peers in the CommSec State of States report, and forecasts that our gross state product over the 2024-25 financial year will go backwards. Territorians are looking to the CLP to rebuild our economy, which is what we went to the election with. Treasurer, can you please update the House on the state of the Territory economy and point to signs that the CLP is turning the Territory economy around?
Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Wanguri for the question, and it's a very important question. And as we know, over the last week I've been travelling across the Territory speaking about the situation that the Territory budget is in. But we need to differentiate between the Territory budget and the Territory economy, and I've said that in all the talks I've given over the last week. Now, the previous Labor government didn't believe in CommSec. Every time we asked about CommSec, they said, no, we don't believe in that. They don't know what they're talking about. Those numbers are wrong. They don't give a true reflection. Well, they do give a reflection, Madam Speaker, of the Territory economy and where it currently sits after 8 years of fiscal mismanagement by the previous Labor government. Because CommSec actually are pretty smart about how they do things. They actually realised that doing the measurements on that 10-year average didn't quite work for small jurisdictions like us. And they actually changed that reporting around to do it year on year. And unfortunately for year on year, we also seen the Territory going backwards in nearly all of those components. But we have seen some turnaround, particularly on that CommSec report. We're doing okay, Madam Speaker, particularly in that area of equipment spending, but that's off the back of the defence spending. And the Chief Minister has spoken about just yesterday in our year ahead speech, and of course in this Parliament, about our focus on defence and of course where the Commonwealth sits on the focus on defence of Australia, and the Territory playing a key part of that. So those spends there are good, but we've actually seen some turnaround in some of those economic figures, Madam Speaker, which shows that the Territory is on that path to recovery economically. There is lots of work to do, and the work that we're doing is already in train, and we're speaking tomorrow and this week about the Territory Coordinator. The Chief Minister spoke about that yesterday in her year ahead speech, and this will be a game changer for the Territory. It's going to provide that confidence and attract that investment here to the Territory, and we can make ourselves the place to do business. We have the resource sector to rival Western Australia, but we have not had the investors who have had the confidence to come and invest here in the Territory. And that's the work that we're doing as a CLP government moving into the next 4 years, is to work with investors and work with proponents to make the Territory that place to want to come and do business, to make the Territory the place to do business. Because it will be through that investment from those people outside the Territory and those other proponents that will help us grow our own source revenue. And it will be our own source revenue that is going to start to dig us out of the financial hole that the Labor Party put us into. And I need to remind everybody in this chamber, 8 years ago, Labor started with $2 billion in debt. And after 8 years, they've left us $11.6 billion in debt and $2 billion in the last 18 months.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, in your press release today with your so-called lobbyist register, you only say certain kinds of lobbyist organisations will need to register to meet with yourself or your ministers, whilst others don't. Minister, what is your definition of a lobbyist? Who can decide who is supposed to register and who doesn't? Can you please tell us who will maintain this register? Will it be your political office? Will it be a government department? Will it be an independent body? Can you please provide details of the register so Territorians can understand it?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate your interest, Opposition Leader. And I think what you must be getting at is you want to know if the unions are going to have to register on the lobby register. That's what I'm hearing, Madam Speaker. Well, it's okay. You can tell your union masters they're off the hook. All right, every time you meet with them to get your writing instructions, you won't have to put it in the lobby register. The lobby register, and I was clear about this in my first answer, is around third-party lobbyists, so those professional people of firms who are being paid to represent a client to lobby. So your unions, your master builders of the world, those types of industry groups are not included because it's very, master builders represent the construction industry. It's very, very clear. They're a member-based organisation, and ministers know when they meet with master builders, it's going to be about those issues and the issues that their members are raising with them. The transparency this brings means that someone you might not know, so we all meet with people all the time on the street, in the shops, in official meetings, and so this then puts the onus. So a minister might meet or talk to someone who they didn't know was a lobbyist if that person doesn't disclose it, because it's not obvious. So their responsibility and obligation now is to make sure that the minister is informed, and the minister cannot meet with them or engage with them unless they are on the lobby register, which will be kept by Department of Chief Minister and Cabinet so that it's all transparent and clear. You can be kicked off the lobby register if you fail to meet those obligations, and a minister cannot meet with someone who's been kicked off the register, and all of those usual measures are in place. All the usual sanctions are in place for ministers. If someone does meet with a banned lobbyist, for example, I can make them give an apology. I can make them do a whole range of measures. But the onus is really on the lobbyist, because that's where the transparency comes in, and that's where it's so very important that they are the ones being really upfront about it. Because as we said, we meet with people every day of the week in different circumstances, and if they're pretending to be advocating on an issue and there's not that transparency there, the onus must be on the lobbyist to do that. So we're very proud of delivering this register. It's of course the first time the Territory's had a lobbyist register, so it will be new, and we will make sure that we reach out to known lobbyists around the country to make sure they understand the new rules in the Territory. And as I said, they're starting paper-based because we wanted to kick it off for the start of the year, Madam Speaker, but that will all go online and electronically, including the watch list for those people who've done the wrong thing and breached the lobby register.
Member for Goyder.
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, our government's new reducing crime laws passed in October last year, together with our strong backing of police, has seen an additional 500 people enter into our prisons. That's 500 more people off the streets than under Labor's failed soft on crime approach. Chief Minister, as part of our plan to reduce crime, Operation Ludlow in Alice Springs saw considerable additional police resources deployed over the summer. As part of your many visits to Alice Springs, I know that you have seen firsthand the work the police on the ground are doing and heard the community's concerns around safety and what must be done to improve law and order. Can you please update the House on the positive progress the police operation has delivered in Alice Springs?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Member for Goyder, and I know you know how passionate you are about the regions and about supporting community safety and backing in our police. And I have to thank all of our hardworking police over that school holiday period. You know, it's a peak demand time for the Territory, but particularly for Alice Springs. And having been to Alice Springs 7 times, most recently coming back Friday, you can start to see the change. But Madam Speaker, I must say there is so much more work to do. And we said right from day one, when there was all of this ridiculous noise from, people saying, well, where's the summer plan? And my answer to them is, well, what did the summer plan do for anyone, Madam Speaker? Absolutely nothing. Labor's summer plan delivered the highest rates of crime that town had ever seen, the highest rates of demoralisation for people crying out for action. So we didn't deliver a fake, glossy, brochured summer plan for people in Alice Springs who'd had enough. What we delivered was a comprehensive and consistent response to that town, which continues. So we brought Operation Ludlow in early, Madam Speaker, increasing police and having very targeted operations, and it was exceptionally successful. We then created the Fugitive Task Force, following, of course, the horrific, brutal attack on the beautiful baby girl and the Seguenza family, who I've had the opportunity to meet that family a couple of times now. And the Fugitive Task Force targeted high-harm, high-risk offenders. In Alice Springs alone, they arrested over 60 people, territory-wide over 100. Arrests in Operation Ludlow in Alice Springs alone were over 350. We saw the ATVs out, we saw patrols out, increased traffic policing, RBTs, you name it. And one thing I'm incredibly proud of as Police Minister, Madam Speaker, is resolving the issue of drone operations in Alice Springs. Now, our drone operations were limited up until the opportunity I had to work with the federal government to get those CASA exemptions lifted, and it has changed policing in Alice Springs. It's not only made it easier and quicker, for example, to intercept stolen vehicles, but it's made it safer for our police. And so the measures we are taking have made a real impact on the ground. There is still much more work to do. This is not job done. But I have to say, Circuit Breaker in Alice Springs has been fantastic. They have had a 100% strike rate, following up with every child's family within 24 hours. They've had 4 to 6 youth workers out on the street every single night. We have had great results in that space, and we will continue to work hard. On the 7th of March, we will deliver 11 more fresh recruits from the college to the people of Alice Springs, and we're proud to be supporting that important town.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, in August last year, you told Territorians that you wouldn't be bringing in austerity measures because you would be spending responsibly. Since then, Chief Minister, you've scrapped economy-building projects midstream, wasting millions of dollars here in the Territory. You've announced new projects without costings, Chief Minister. You've also removed the debt cap and the accountability measure of reporting to the Parliament. Chief Minister, you announced an uncosted prisons plan which is likely to run into the billions of dollars, at the same time saying you won't cut the public service. Chief Minister, when will you be honest with Territorians about how much of all this will cost and who is going to pay for it?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I find this question very interesting. Number one, our Corrections Infrastructure Master Plan has delivered another nearly 260 male prisoner beds since coming to government. We've put more than 500 more people in prison since the August election. They're people that under your watch would be out on the street destroying people's lives. So yeah, we have a corrections infrastructure problem because your government buried corrections in the bottom of Attorney Generals and Justice, where they had to beg, borrow and steal for every penny to run a broken correction system. And that was before we put 500 more people into it. So yeah, Opposition Leader, there's an absolute crisis, and that's why we're delivering our infrastructure plan. You will see the costings of that in the budget. That's where these things go, into a properly structured, funded budget process. But we will build this infrastructure because the community safety is our highest priority. And people don't want us spending $143 million on a Darwin art gallery that no one's going to visit. They'd rather us build prisons. But your legacy will be that white elephant sitting in State Square, Opposition Leader. That will be Labor's legacy. Spending money where we don't need it and not spending money where we do. We're bringing legislation to support our corrections officers for this very reason of underfunding and lack of support by Labor. Scrapping economy building projects, she claimed. Well, I'd love to hear a couple. What are they? What are these economy building projects that we've scrapped? Would love to know, Opposition Leader. And in terms of the debt cap, this is a fake number that Michael Gunner and co plucked out of the air years ago to fake to Territorians that you were doing something about managing your spending. And look where we are now. That was when debt, I think, was about $7 billion, Madam Speaker. We're now at 11. It was projected to be, I think it was 35-ish, Treasurer, back in that time. Absolutely astonishing, mind-blowing, unconscionably bad numbers. And so we have to make the hard decisions around when we spend money. We will spend it in prisons, we will spend it in courts, we will spend it in corrections, we will spend it on the front line where it's needed, because people in our communities need to be safe above everything else. And that's why we're putting every other bit of energy into growing the economy, because that's where we'll get more revenue to be able to continue to grow the territory moving forward. So I know, Opposition Leader, it's easy to be given a question and walk down here and ask it, but think about what you're saying in this parliament, because the reality is under 8 years of Labor, you destroyed our budget, destroyed our economy, destroyed our lifestyle, and let crime destroy our lives. That's your legacy. Ours will be fixing your mess and making the territory a better place.
Member for Blaine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment. Minister, rebuilding the economy was one of the three key commitments that our government took to the 2024 election. To achieve this, we must provide industry and business with regulatory processes that support certainty in development and investment. Can you please tell us what you've done to crack down on environmental lawfare and provide certainty and consistency in regulatory decisions for investors and industry to drive economic growth?
Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Blaine for the question. Madam Speaker, for too long, those with ideological and disruptive agendas have stifled economic growth and investment here in the Northern Territory. This week, we have shown that we are serious about taking action to provide certainty, employment opportunities and prosperity for Territorians and industry. And earlier this week, I, with my parliamentary colleagues, was there at the launch of the 2025 The Year of Action. And the Chief Minister spoke very strongly at that Year of Action about the Territory economy. We've promised that we would build and rebuild the Territory economy, and to do that, we must be able to provide industry and businesses with regulatory processes that support certainty in development and investment. This is a huge part of what Territorians voted us in for, Madam Speaker. We have doubled down on our commitment to stamp out green lawfare and open the Territory up for economic growth. I am introducing, or have today, the Petroleum Planning and Water Legislation Amendment Bill 2025, which will remove the ability for third parties to seek merits review of decisions made across the Petroleum Planning and Water Acts. For years now, Madam Speaker, third-party merits reviews have been weaponised by those with no genuine stake in projects and no evidence to back in their claims, only a disruptive agenda to delay crucial developments. We have a robust regulatory regime here in the Northern Territory, which has undergone significant reform over the years. We have an independent water controller who makes decisions over granting water licences, an independent development consent authority who makes planning decisions, and an independent environment protection authority who can call in, review any projects it considers necessary and add additional conditions to those approvals. A move away from this recommendation of the Pepper inquiry does not mean, Madam Speaker, that we do not support a robust, safe and well-regulated onshore gas industry. We must recognise that this recommendation is not concerned with the ongoing safety of the industry and is in fact damaging to the economic prospects of the Northern Territory. This change will provide greater consistency across legislation, put trust back in the experts and give industry the confidence they need to invest here in the Northern Territory. I've been very clear, Madam Speaker, that I will not enable green lawfare to continue to delay economic progress, which is why I've also terminated taxpayer-funded support for the Environmental Centre, NT, and the Arid Lands Environment Centre. These agreements saw $100,000 to both of those organisations. This follows, once again, Madam Speaker, us ensuring that last year we basically ensure that $100,000 to the EDO was also cancelled.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Corrections. Minister, I understand the Stringy Bark facility, which has an operational capacity of 160 beds, is currently empty. I've been informed that the only barrier to it operating is the requirement for razor wire on the existing fencing. I've also been advised that for under $1 million, the necessary fencing and other security updates could be rapidly completed and that this centre could be fully staffed and operational within 6 weeks. Can you please outline whether this has been considered as a means of addressing the current crisis in corrections and in particular the overflowing watch houses? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Minister for Corrections.
Thank you, Member for Johnson. And we have considered all options in relation to this, Member for Johnson, but I just want to clarify why we are in such a crisis situation. We know for the last 8 years the Labor government failed to invest in the prison system, which has resulted in overcrowding and overflowing into our watch houses. This is not ideal, but this is what a legacy the Labor government have left us to deal with. And we're dealing with that because we've got a master plan. We're moving forward with that master plan. In fact, we are over and above our master plan in relation to number of beds because the CLP is committed to keeping the community safe. Keeping the community safe is the #1 priority for the government. Unlike the Labor government, Madam Speaker, who let it go through the roof. They let people just go off and do what they want to do and continue to commit crimes and keep our community unsafe.
Take your seat, please, Minister. What's your point of order, Member for Johnston?
Standing Order 110, relevance. That was not the question I asked, Minister.
I think he's got plenty of time to answer your question. He's got more than 2 minutes. Minister, you have the call.
Thank you. Yeah, so, Madam Speaker, yes, we have considered that section, but ultimately we have committed, Madam Speaker, to moving out of that area. Part of the commitments to the CLP is to make the Holts at Howard Springs the prison precinct, and that's where we're going to move and install our prisons because it's important that we keep it all together because, again, the CLP are thinking about budget, thinking about money and thinking about resources. Having places spread right across the Northern Territory is expensive. And, of course, we've got staff numbers as well, which is another issue, another legacy left over by the previous government. So, in relation to putting that fence up, it's not $1 million, Madam Speaker. It's over $6 million, in fact, to get that fence put up. So if this government is going to rationalise its spending, and spending $6 million for a year or so does not make sense to me, Madam Speaker, not to mention the issues in relation to the staffing they'll have to spread it across another facility. We already know, because of the lack of investment by the previous Labor government, staffing is at a crisis point. And that's why I've introduced, or I will introduce tomorrow, legislation to help ease that pressure point in a very short term. But we need to deal with this corrections crisis caused by the Labor government in a really thoughtful manner to make sure we don't waste government money, we keep staff safe, and we also keep prisoners safe. And more importantly, Madam Speaker, we need to keep the community safe. That is the #1 priority in our government. I noticed the interjection about watch houses. Madam Speaker, that was brought in by the previous Labor government. They put the prisoners into the watch house. We're dealing with that issue. We are moving forward because our #1 priority is to get them out of there. But unfortunately, Madam Speaker, you can't just blow up a prison overnight. It's not just a matter of getting a little balloon, it pops, here it goes. Prisons are expensive. Prisons take time because they need to be done correctly to make sure the staff are safe. And I want to have a big shout out to the prison staff, Madam Speaker. Prison staff do a wonderful job in a very, very difficult situation caused by the previous Labor government.
Member for Karama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education and Training. Minister, under the previous Labor government, annual school attendance from 2016 to 2023 dropped from 62 to 46% in the Barkly region, 71 to 58% in the Big Rivers region, dropping to 66% in Central region and 54% in the Arnhem region. Now, as you're aware, I have 7 schools in my electorate, and you've joined me in a couple of visits to them, and it's vital that the education of our children. So, over the last few months of 2024, I heard stories of children not going to school, particularly in Nucky Lagoon. Minister, I was pleased recently to meet with some of your school attendance officers in my electorate office, and they're doing a great job. Minister, it is crucial we get our kids to school. Can you please update the House on the school attendance program?
Minister for Education.
Thank you to the member for Karama, and the member Karama is right in acknowledging the dismal school attendance rates, Madam Speaker, that occurred under the former Labor government. When Labor came to power in 2016, the annual attendance rate for NT schools was 80.8%. When they left office just last year, it had dropped to 71.1%. 71.7%. Madam Speaker, the more remote the schools, the worse the attendance rates are. And this is why the Finocchiaro CLP government have introduced school attendance officers. They'll work with families through education to get their kids to school, but also have the powers to fine parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school. And I've been out right across the territory here in Darwin, Palmerston, in my community of Katherine, and as recently as last week in Alice Springs with those attendance officers. We actually just kicked off the media campaign last week in Alice Springs, and you know, that campaign is out there on radio, TV, it's in language. So sending your children to school is in fact, Madam Speaker, law, and parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school without a valid reason will get a fine, a $370 fine, Madam Speaker. But we are not just leaving it there. We'll be making referrals to the Commonwealth for income management if fines are unpaid, and we are now advocating to the federal government to accept the referrals for parents who neglect their children to additional income management. And the Chief Minister has brought that up with the opposition leader recently with our 7-point plan. And it is about implementing 100% of income management for parents and of youth offenders. So we make no apologies for holding parents accountable for their children's education. Every child, Madam Speaker, deserves a right to an education, and we will no longer accept the status quo and keep doing more of the same, hoping things will get better. Over the school holidays, the Department of Education and Training has been recruiting training school attendance officers. As I said, I've been out on patrol with those school attendance officers. And Madam Speaker, just a quick story about how great the work is that those school attendance officers do. In my community in Katherine, we came across a family. I know the family that have lived in Katherine for a long time. The young child that was with them was not at school. When we were talking to him about he didn't really want to go to school, and I said, well, you know, let's call him Johnny for the record. I will come and pick you up, Johnny. And so he was quite happy to do that. Now, Madam Speaker, he wasn't there at his house the next day when I went to school because he'd got himself out. He knows the importance of going to school and getting an education. And I was so proud of him that he had made it to school under his own accord. And that's a good job for the school attendance officer.
Member for Nycliffe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, a lobbyist register is something that myself and the NT Greens have been calling for a long time, and I've been listening keenly to your responses here. I understand you've said that third-party lobbyists need to register so that ministers know who they're dealing with, but what about transparency for the public? That's meant to be the real intention of a lobbyist register. To ensure genuine transparency and accountability, ministerial diaries must be published with the register, including which lobbyists they're meeting with, when they have met and what topics are discussed. Will this be included in your register?
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I note the member's interest in a lobbyist register, and I also note the Territory has never had one before. Today's announcement delivers on a commitment we made to Territorians last year, and it's a commitment that Labor absolutely flatly refused to make and not deliver on, and that's why we've never had one despite them being in power for the last 8 years. So our lobbyist register is very simple, it's very clear. It takes into consideration the size of our jurisdiction. It provides that important transparency that was otherwise not lacking, so that people are very conscious and aware of who they're meeting with, what it is they're meeting about. And, you know, ultimately, Member for Nightcliff, it might not satisfy you where we landed on this, and there are different ways of doing it right around the country, but we're really proud of where we've landed on a practical bit of integrity measures on the back of other measures we've already taken. I mentioned earlier having an independent speaker, doubling the time for petitions to be debated in the Parliament, something we were rarely afforded under the previous Labor government, and the legislative scrutiny committees to provide that important oversight of big substantive pieces of legislation like Territory Coordinator. So our lobby register is up. The website is being worked through. We're certainly hoping to have that website online by the end of the day, but, you know, it could be tomorrow, Madam Speaker. But certainly if anyone is rushing to apply to register right now, there are the paper-based versions of it. And again, this is about making sure that we have a process where people who are paid professionals to go out and lobby ministers for certain outcomes for their specific client have a responsibility to make sure that the minister is aware of that they've disclosed all of the information required so that the right transparency levels are being put on it. Now, we're very, very proud to be bringing in the Territory's first lobbyist register, and again, this is something Labor just flatly refused to do.
Minister. Point of order, Member for Nightcliff.
110, I just want to answer to, will the ministerial diaries section, will they actually be published?
Chief Minister, your call.
Thank you, and I note that it is in some jurisdictions. That was never part of our commitment around a lobbyist register, and it isn't a part of the lobby code of conduct. I note the opposition leader just called out shame. Shame on you, opposition leader. Your government never did this. You refused to do this. You didn't promise to do it. In fact, you flatly refused it. Now, all of a sudden, the shoe's on the other foot. She's had a rush of blood to the head and she thinks, oh, I wish I did that earlier. Well, you had your chance and you failed. You absolutely failed. So don't come in here and tell us how we should be doing transparency better from a government that lacked integrity.
Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Children and Families, Child Protection and the Prevention of Domestic Violence. Early intervention and prevention programs are essential for supporting youth in overcoming challenges and building successful futures. In recent years, youth in the NT have faced rising rates of disengagement and antisocial behaviour, and this is extremely evident in my electorate of Drysdale. Can the Minister outline what steps are being taken to enhance early intervention and prevention programs for our youth and how the government plans to address the current gaps in service delivery?
Minister for Children and Families.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Member for Drysdale, for your question regarding our plans around early intervention and prevention programs for young people in the Territory. As a former youth worker, I know you have a knowledge and understanding in this very challenging environment and the challenges and pressures that places on our community, and I would commend you for the advocacy that you have put into advocacy on your community's behalf in looking to how we may be able to work with you to resolve some of the challenges you're facing in Drysdale. As members of the House will know, our youth face quite unique challenges. We have to deal with distance, we have to deal with challenges around school attendance, we deal with health issues, and so it is a really unique environment that we need to be able to intercede at a very early point. In the past, we saw basic taxi services being run where children were on the street at early hours of the morning, they were picked up, collected, returned home, they would leave again, they would be picked up, collected and returned home, and that vicious cycle really needed to be broken. So what we did was in December, we looked at what our opportunities were and how we could actually start to close the gap that we're seeing in this environment. And we created the Circuit Breaker program specifically to intervene with our young people and give them the chance that they had been missing out of. And most importantly as well, giving our youth workers the chance to do more than operate as a taxi service. So this program intervenes at a point in time where we have a chance of breaking that vicious cycle, where we can actually work with these young people and their families to find out why they're out on the street, Madam Speaker, in the early hours of the morning. What is it that's in their home environment that's making it not possible for them to feel safe and comforted and cared for? What is happening that we might be able to assist them with addressing? Is there an issue with domestic violence? Is there an issue with alcohol? Is there just simply an issue where a family has desperately tried to keep their child on track but just can't manage to break that interaction with groups that are leading them down the wrong path? And the real difference in this program, Madam Speaker, is that these families are followed up within 24 hours, there's meetings held and family responsibility agreements entered into so that the entire network around that child is working very closely with them to make sure that they go to school, to make sure that they're healthy. And if they're living in an environment where things are not going, Madam Speaker, the way that you would want them to, that we work with the families to help them. Is there an issue where we can actually help mum or dad or auntie or grandma to get their life back on track as well? So it's a very holistic approach. And I'm delighted to say since commencing, we've had 75 children come into this program. Around 45% of them are under 12, which is addressing the issues that we've faced with young kids as well.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, you have uncosted prisons plan that could run into the billions. You've committed no public sector cuts. Treasurer, you've also repeatedly said we can't keep borrowing. When will you level with Territorians about how you're paying for all of your underfunded commitments?
Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question. And I really do look forward to answering this, particularly around corrections, because I'd like to say that I probably know a little bit about corrections after spending 18 years there. And I think I've said it publicly and I've said it in this House before. There was a report done in New South Wales many years ago because New South Wales Correctional Services and their justice system crashed. And it crashed because New South Wales invested heavily into their police and failed to invest in the justice system. Now, I've said it for years in this place, and I've said it to the opposition when they were in power, when they were in government. What have you done to invest into corrections? Now, they invested heavily in police because crime was going through the roof, but they failed to invest into the justice system. And what they found in New South Wales is that for every dollar that you spend on police, you need to invest $1.50 into your justice system. And that's community corrections, courts and corrections. That failed to happen. We called on the opposition when they were in government to invest into corrections, and it was only at the very last part of their term in government that they finally actually started to listen and did a little bit of investment into corrections, but it was too little too late. Numbers in Alice Springs were going through the roof, so they finally decided to increase capacity in the Alice Springs Correctional Centre. But what they failed to do, Madam Speaker, is they failed to also then invest in the staffing that it was going to require to man that facility. And that is the hard work and the heavy lifting that we are now doing as the government. The failure of the Labor Party, when they are in power, to invest into corrections is absolutely appalling and has put the community and correctional officers at risk. We're doing the hard work now to find the beds to be able to accommodate those prisoners, and we make no apologies for picking people up for committing crimes and putting them into custody to keep the community safe. But you need those all-important beds. But significantly, Madam Speaker, you also need the staff to be able to manage those offenders, and that's why the Minister for Correctional Services is bringing that all-important legislation into this House to provide the ability to get staff from interstate, from other jurisdictions, to come and alleviate the pressures. But picking up on the Leader of the Opposition's issues around the budget, yes, we're going to have to spend some money and invest it into corrections because the opposition, when they were in government, failed to do that all-important investment, and that's why corrections finds itself in the position that it's in. Yes, we're probably going to have to borrow some money and spend it on corrections, but we're also going to be reprioritising some money. We're going to stop the wasteful spending that we've seen under the previous government and invest territory money where it needs to go to provide security, safety for our correctional services, personnel and prisoners.
Member for Casuarina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Chief Minister and Minister for Corrections. We have heard you speak regarding the rising number of prisoners and the challenges with accommodating this 18% rise over the last 5 months within the current correction system. We know that action was required as far back as 2017, with continued distress of the system throughout 2020, 2022, and 2023, including using police watch houses to avoid creating new beds in our prisons. Despite their spin, Labor sat on their hands and ignored the rising numbers. The Treasurer tells us that spending in the justice system stagnated, failing Territorians and enabling a crime crisis. Can you please update the House on what action you are taking to build capacity to manage the rapid increase in prisoner numbers?
Minister for Corrections.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Member for Casuarina. That's a great question because I know that you are concerned about community safety, as of all the people on this side of the chamber are concerned about community safety. And it seems to be, Madam Speaker, the previous government had no concerns about community safety because they let it go through the roof. They made the Territory one of the most unsafe places to be, to a point where my wife was confronted with a man with a knife. I'm sure there's lots of people in here who have seen or heard of these violent acts which shouldn't occur in any capital city, never alone in our town of Darwin in the Northern Territory. So shame on you. Shame on the previous government from letting us get into this situation because it's just an absolute embarrassment. Madam Speaker, for 8 years the former government ignored the mounting pressures and leaving us in a costly crisis in relation to corrections. Overcrowding in our prison system is a legacy years in the making. This is not a new problem. Madam Speaker, in 2017 it was obvious that action was needed. There was a report in the Darwin prison that back in 2017 it was at 99% capacity. So this is not a new issue. And yet the Labor government had no idea how to fix it. In fact, I heard a rumour their plan was let him out early. Let him out early. Had cabinet discussions, and I'm sure the member for the opposition leader would remember that because that's what I heard happened in their cabinet. Just let him out because we can't deal with the issue. It's so embarrassing. Madam Speaker, there's a report, the Paget report in 2020 about the riot. There was going to be significant issues, and again, no action taken place. Just let it go through the keeper. Madam Speaker, today prison officers still face the challenge of finding beds, and we are doing something about that, Madam Speaker. We are bringing on beds at the Berrima Correction Centre and the Youth Detention Centre in Holtz and also in Alice Springs. Madam Speaker, I just remind you that the Youth Detention Centre in Holtz was 2 years late and $70 million. $70 million over budget. The 96 beds in Alice Springs, Madam Speaker, it was budgeted at $20 million, came in at over $32 million. That's $12 million. Madam Speaker, imagine how much that could have been used to keep the community safe or to increase capacity or to develop the staff. And instead, because the previous Labor government failed to manage the projects, it blew out $70 million. $70 million. Yeah, they trashed it in literally 27 minutes. So all this planning and all these experts are oversaw by the previous government, and I think the member for Gorgia was the Corrections Minister. He oversaw that, and the Cabinet knew that they were spending this money, and yet they failed. We are building capacity into the room. We've already added 164 beds in the system. 48 in Berrima will open this month, Another 100 beds will come online at the end of the month, and of course the 96 beds will be added to Alice Springs in the very near future. This is a crisis.
Member for Mulca.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question to the Minister for Corrections. On Friday, the government announced that there were 500 more prisoners in our jails since 2024 election. Of these 500 people, how many are Aboriginal people? What are the current percentage of Aboriginal people contained in and detained by corrections in the Northern Territory, adult and youth facilities? And how does this situation align with the Aboriginal Justice Agreement, rather?
Minister for Corrections.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And look, I'll start by saying I don't have those exact figures right here now because that's some very technical data. And I can undertake to get that to you, and I will undertake to do that. But, Madam Speaker, what I want to talk about is continue talking about is this crisis caused by the previous government that put these people into prison. And what I can say, Madam Speaker, if you don't want to go into the prison and you don't want to experience overcrowding, don't commit the crime. It's pretty simple. We are going to do our best to deal with this crisis caused by the previous Labor government. We have brought online beds at Berrima. We've brought online the Youth Detention Centre in Holtz. We've brought online Alice Springs in relation to the paper bark facility, which we're going to convert into a bail support facility, because it's not only about putting these people in prison, because I think we all understand putting someone in prison is probably not the best. They need to be rehabilitated. They need to have education. And, Madam Speaker, I've been into these watch houses, I've been into the youth detention centres, and I've seen these children and these young offenders being taught, going to school. Madam Speaker, I think we heard earlier that from the Education Minister that it is against the law not to send your child to school. And that's unfortunately what happened to some of these young offenders. They don't go to school because of whatever circumstances, so they are being deprived of what it takes to be an educated person. And, Madam Speaker, I make no apologies. Unfortunately, you need to be educated in this world today. You need to be able to do your daily finances. You need to be able to go to the shop and give some money and get the right change back. You need to be able to balance your budget. Unlike the previous Labor government, who clearly couldn't balance their budget, Madam Speaker, because they spent $1 billion more than they had each year, approximately. So it's important, Madam Speaker, that we deal with this crisis, and it's going to be expensive, and it's not nice in prison. It is overcrowded. It's not ideal. But this is a problem caused by the previous government, and we have a plan to fix this. We are moving forward step by step. And, Madam Speaker, like I said, we're actually advanced ourselves. We're moving down the path of our prison master plan quicker than we do because we've got these extra numbers. We are bringing more beds online. We acknowledge that there's going to be a staffing crisis, and I've heard the workforce cry out saying they're working 16, 18-hour days. There's short staff. So we're doing something about that as well, Madam Speaker. We're here to work with the Corrections Union. We're here to work with the Commissioner to make sure that going to your job as a correction officer is safe, that you get home and you're not overworked. We don't want to burn people out. We know that living in the Darwin is a great lifestyle. You need to have your time off. You need to spend time with your family, and also it needs to be safe, Madam Speaker. So we make no apologies. If you commit a crime in the Northern Territory, we're going to find you a bed.
Member for Fanny Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Attorney General. Attorney General, our 17-strong team came into government left with a broken justice system that was left in crisis, with long-term overloaded courts, capacity issues and delays that put strain on our whole system. Instead of taking action, the former government sat back and allowed the system to further deteriorate. It's something that I have witnessed personally as a prosecutor for the Department of Education. Since coming into office, I have watched you waste no time meeting with key stakeholders, identifying and fixing issues. Can you please update the House on the urgent reforms this government is delivering?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Member for Fanny Bay, and I think your constituents would be quite surprised to hear that you did work in the prosecutions area, so well done for that, and look at you now helping sort out the mess that Labor has left. So you're right, since day one when we came to government, we have been committed to fixing the mess that Labor left behind after 8 years of neglect, Madam Speaker. And in my role as Attorney General, I have been out on the ground seeing firsthand the pressures in our justice system. I even sat in the court watching the live cases, and that is something that the Labor Attorney Generals have never done.
Point of order.
Take your seat, Minister. What's your point of order, Member for Guadja?
109. The Attorney-General is misleading Parliament. As the former Northern Territory Attorney-General, I attended
just
multiple
hold
times
there.
in
If you-
court for a number of hearings.
You can only do that by substantive motion. Member for Guadja, that's unacceptable. Please withdraw.
I will withdraw, but I'll remind honourable members to fact-find before they make statements in this House around the validity and the truth of what's being said.
Attorney-General, you have the call.
I think I hit a nerve there, Madam Speaker. Unlike Labor, which ignored the problem, we are delivering real reform. One of the immediate steps that we took was lifting the cap on prisoners being held in the court cells. Courts were artificially restricted in the number of cases they could process each day, and we worked with the courts to remove this unnecessary cap, allowing more matters to be heard daily. This simple, sensible decision has improved efficiency at no cost to the taxpayer. We have also expanded the capacity of our local courts. In both Darwin and Alice Springs, courts now have the flexibility to run 2 bail and arrest courts simultaneously. This is about making the most of the resources we already have rather than ignoring the pressure our justice system had been facing under the watch of Labor. Madam Speaker, to address judicial shortages, our government acted swiftly, appointing 3 new acting judges. This was particularly important over the busy Christmas and New Year period when the demand peaked. We're also investing in modernising court processes, including expanding the use of audio-visual link technology to speed up hearings and reduce transport costs, very important for police and corrections. And, Madam Speaker, can you believe that Labor only gave our prosecutors a 12-month contract? Absolutely shameful. There was no job security for these essential members of our justice system who play a critical role in keeping criminals off our streets. But, Madam Speaker, we will fix this. We recognise also, Madam Speaker, the critical role that the legal services play, and we have delivered proportionate increases in funding because this ensures justice for victims sooner. Labor allowed court backlogs to spiral out of control. Madam Speaker, we have made a lot of changes, but we're not there yet, and this is not a set and forget approach. This is real reform, and we will demonstrate real results this year, and you'll continue to see our government get things done. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that any further questions be put on the written notice paper.